I bet you didn't know that my first trip to Seattle was in 1999, when I came to the West Coast with my parents. We were visiting family and friends in Portland and Vancouver, British Columbia. On our way from Vancouver to Seattle in the Greyhound, my dad asked me if I knew that Microsoft headquarters was also in Seattle. I did not know then. If someone had told me then that one day I would be working at Microsoft, I would have certainly dismissed it as a fantasy. Fast forward 2 years, I still remember my first interview at Microsoft in 2001. My hiring manager asked me during the lunch interview at the Pike Place Market as to why I wanted to work at Microsoft. My response was that it would be a dream come true. Unfortunately, both our sentiments had shifted by the end of that internship in August. I felt stretched beyond capacity, and he felt that I was not the right fit. However, the story did not end there. Somehow, I was determined to be at Microsoft, at any cost, within reason. He saw my tears and a genuine passion for pursuit. Subsequently, he reached out to HR to hire me for another role, where he thought that I would be a better fit. In this publication, I have documented my career journey and lessons learned so far, mainly for personal self-reflections, but also for those who aspire to be on this path. Where applicable, I have used the names of peers and colleagues with their consent. As a kid, I was never a daddy's girl. I was more of my mother's pet. My third sister was more of my daddy's protege, where as an infant she even said Abba before mummy. However, it was not until my late 20s that my physician revealed to me that I had more of my dad's genes. That was a startling revelation, that not only had I inherited my dad's initials, IG or IIG, but his brain was my mind's blueprint. This is in no way to undermine the role of my mother in the journey of my accomplishments. Though Abba believed in the progressiveness of females and saw no difference between the two genders, I beg to differ in his views. However, by destiny or choice, my fate was to walk in Abba's tracks. By looking back only, I have been able to realize the purpose and importance of the human multiplication factor. Essentially, it is through replicated inheritance that the missions of this world and journeys that are unfulfilled are eventually completed through multiple eras. I recall one time around grades 7 to 8 when I was joking with my friends that my dad spent his entire day at work just signing papers. Little did I know then the true metallic core that was needed for working and earning a living. I could not visualize how steep and hard Abba's path was till I started my own climb. But Abba was and has always been there to hold my hand. I want to reiterate the poetry that my sisters and I had written for our parents in the early 90s, alluding to both their struggles between the rift of Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. Far away in a distant land, there lives someone who understands. The problems that we face in life, he solves them with his lovely wife. Beyond the homeschooling of my two eldest sisters, Aquila Musani and Rahila Vayani, if I were to attribute my passion for mathematics to one person, it would be to my grade 11 math teacher, Lubna Aziz, from DHA Degree College for Women in Karachi, Pakistan. There is only one word to describe her thorough approach to teaching math. That is crystal clarity. She drew a remarkable inspiration for mathematics in me. I flew high in my math passion until I enrolled in the Advanced Calculus course, Mat 157, at the University of Toronto. 2 weeks into that course, I knew that I was done. It was evident to my family through severe pimples on my face that just how stressed out I was. Thanks to their support, I was able to scale back to the regular calculus class of Mat 137, where I hit an unimaginable 100% score at the end of the term. As a kid, if someone ever asked me as to what I had wanted to become, I would have probably said an air hostess or a teacher. If my family had never moved to Canada in 1996, most likely, I would have been a chartered accountant. The only reason for doing so would have been that Rahat Godil, my third sister, was also going to be a chartered accountant, and I wanted to do everything that she was going to do then. When I was finally deciding what to study at the university, my main goal was to do anything that was not connected to life sciences and had a branch of mathematics in it. I was once asked in an interview about the first program that I ever wrote. My first program was a traffic signal in basic language, thanks to my sister, Rahila Vayani, who is also a software engineer. My father used to work in Saudi Arabia, and we used to spend our time there during our summer and winter breaks. I explicitly remember that one day when we imposed ourselves to be accompanied to his office at the age of 10 or 11. My dad asked his office colleagues to help us run the program. It's been a long time since I finished my undergrad. I do remember my first day at U of T when I took the subway down to the St. George station. On the way there, I was crying, and my biggest fear was that I would never get a job. I was also not sure if I would be able to stand in the rankings of my other sisters. For the rest of the years, my hallmark takeaways from the degree were being deeply inspired by Pitassi's K-clicks in CS 364 and the resonating comments in the CS 270 class, where in essence to describe that the state machines would terminate, the professor would exclaim that, "You will terminate." In 2001, when I was asked in my MSFT full-time interview what I had learned from my internship, my answer was that I had learned to learn. However, going back in time, if I had to re-answer that question, my response would be,
My biggest lesson from my 2001 internship at MSFT was that failures in the technical planes are generally pointers to some failures in our value systems. Technical failures are not necessarily isometric technical failures, but rather a reflection of a deeper underlying problem.
When I was seeking a summer internship in my third-year undergrad, I must have applied to at least 100 or so jobs in Toronto, Canada. When I did my first MSFT interview, I was totally gratified. All they had asked me was to read and write code, and hence it was a win-win. When I got the offer to do the on-site interview, I spent the entire month going through a list of every single question that could come up.
I recalled the day of my actual flight. My alarm did not go off, and when my dad came to wake me, he exclaimed, "Why are you still not ready?"
My excitement to be on the MSFT campus was beyond bounds. When I got the offer letter that I was hired, it was unbelievable at many levels. My dad had exclaimed then that when he had graduated, his first job was in East Pakistan's topmost company at Adamji in Dhaka, and how proud he was that my first job was in the world's topmost company. Flying 2,000 miles from the east coast of Canada across into the United States to work for the topmost company in the world was certainly every person's dream that I was getting to live.
The best highlight of the internship was undoubtedly the BBQ at the Bill Gates mansion. From a side Lakeview office on the Seattle Pier, with lunches at the Pike Place Market, to weekend getaways in Vancouver and Victoria, coming to work at MSFT was certainly no less than anyone's dream.
However, when the technical tire started to hit the ground and all the glamour fizzled away, my metallic inner core was put to a real test. I was not ready for it at that time and ended up failing miserably. For better or for worse, somehow, I could not live up to the expectations of my manager then, and he did not deem me to be rehired for the job in his team. This took an immense toll on my self-esteem, and in due process, I started to see the true essence of myself being revealed before me. My failure on the job was not just a technical failure at that point. During the process, I started re-evaluating all the actions that I had done in my egoistic celebratory moments. From taking account of any food waste to boasting about my achievements, everything was on the table to be rectified and recalibrated from that point on.
In due time, my manager sensed my undue personalization of the failure and saw my genuine passion for pursuit. He asked the HR to re-interview me for a tester's position at MSFT. On the technical front, the main feedback was that I should have really understood the depth of the technology and its usage before jumping to implementation. However, for me, the personal reflections were a far more significant lesson in the big picture of things than just failing in the original ask of the job.
Eventually, at the end of 2001, I finally accepted a full-time software test engineer position in James Rodriguez, aka Jim's team in WebaPoint, which later became Microsoft Dynamics. I joined MSFT in 2002 as a full-time employee with a split heart. I was torn between contradictory expectations and remarks from the two ends of the spectrum within my community. On the one hand were genuine well-wishers, advising and advocating that Muslim women should not be in the industrial field, especially when that would entail them to be away from their family. Somehow, the sentiment from the conservative side of the community was that the demands of the job and the environment would necessarily require women to compromise their Islamic values on the job. Then there was the other side, for whom I was already at the top of the world. Working for a Fortune 500 was nothing less than a God-given goldmine opportunity, about which I should have had nothing to complain.
To fight this dilemma within myself, I flew to Seattle with the conviction that I would only stay there for a year or so, and later return home. On the technical front, getting out of the geeky woods of the C+'s COM technology and coming to Jim's web service CC#org was indeed a breeze. From day one of the job, MSFT's commitment to diversity was evident in all areas, even at that time. On the first day of my job at MSFT, Kevin Beto, my mentor, suggested that I should call my family as soon as I had arrived. I wanted to stay firm on my value system, and although I was initially a bit hesitant to ask, I told him that I needed a space to pray. He readily let me use Jim's office as Jim was on vacation.
Later, I continued to share an office with Howard Hurst, Howie. From stepping out each time when it was time for my prayers, to encouraging me to wear the headscarf, if that was what I had really wanted to do then, Howie was no less than a standing pillar. Within the corporate boundaries of MSFT, in my own organization, and in the technical role that I was performing, there was no reason for me to compromise my values, unless I was going to do them anyways, whether I was working or not. The notion that women should not work in the field was an idea that had no relevance associated with it within my technical and geeky professional life. I slowly started to settle in the tracks of my original dreamland and relentlessly tried to undo the technical and ethical failures that had haunted me through the end of my internship.
However, fate had it otherwise. My spirit started to crumble internally and I did not even recognize it. To overlook from what I was suffering, I started to quadruple down on my work deliverables and turned into Rhonda Byrne from The Secret, where she worked herself to exhaustion. Once again, the split between whether to put up with the world's expectations of staying on the top of the game at all costs, to not knowing what I truly wanted for myself, and what of it was actually achievable, I eventually called it quits. Day after day of coming to work with an obsessive mindset that I did not emotionally belong there, finally paid off. I finalized my resignation with my manager, Henrik Jensen, in April 2004. Once the new transition and its fatigue weaned off, I could not be more thankful for the shift and the courage that was blessed on me to have been able to walk out of my dilemma.
In retrospect, my fundamental learning from the experience was Albert Einstein's quote that we cannot solve problems by using the same kind of thinking that we used when we created them. From 2004 onward, if there is one person to whom I owe my career's resurrection, it is undoubtedly my grad school professor, Hans Arno Jacobsen. After settling down in Toronto upon my retreat, I was determined to cut all ties with the option Bs of my life. With headwinds in all directions, which comprised of severe peer pressure again, to not knowing what the future would hold for me, I cared less and lived vicariously through Steve Jobs' soul in that moment, when he said, "Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life."
I walked into my professor's office and sincerely wanted to call it quits from the industry altogether. Arno showed a sincere concern for my plight and asked me to continue to stay in the program for a few more weeks before officially calling it quits. Those weeks eventually became months, and finally, we landed our AOP flight in 2006 in the UOFT's Convocation Hall. From working through Christmas breaks in the middleware lab to becoming a Center of Advanced Study student at IBM Canada, Arno and his fellow, Charles Jung, were my true torchbearers.
IBM Rites of Passage, 2006-2010. If there was a term to describe my 2006-2010 tenure at IBM, it would be Rites of Passage. Rites of passage usually involve ritual activities and teachings designed to strip individuals of their original roles and prepare them for new roles. One day in 2007-08, my colleague and an eventual manager, Vadim Berestetsky, showed me a book as we were working on the Message Broker Flow editor. He asked me if I knew who had written the book and eventually called out that an ex-IBM engineer, who had later gone to MSFT, had written it. Although my current publication is nowhere close to the technical depth of the EMF book, the coincidence is remarkable. If on that day I was told that one day I would be another ex-IBMer writing a book at MSFT, I would absolutely have dismissed it as another fantasy. If there is a word to describe my primary lessons at IBM, it is T.J. Watson's slogan, "Think." My most significant lesson at IBM was that the most important lessons and events in both our careers and personal lives are not the ones that we learn on the technical plane, but sometimes are the ones that transcend technicalities. From being challenged by the genius of Alan Chan to the support shoulder of Dorian Burson, I still get a reminiscent feeling of being home as I walk through the neighborhood of Markham downtown every time I'm in Toronto, Canada. Although I had retreated to Toronto, a part of me always knew that it was not my long-term home. In late 2009, I called Henrik Jensen one evening to discuss opportunities at MSFT. He only asked me one question: would you move back to Seattle?
My answer was affirmative. I remember the evening of January 2010, when Jackie Bradnan walked me to the cab after my interview in Building 30. She was no less than a guardian angel, standing by my side to welcome me back to MSFT. If there was one person to whom I owed my survival in the exchange organization from 2010-2014, it was my manager then, Mark Taylor. Mark Taylor's two biggest teaching points were write down everything and priority is everything. From supporting me as a woman in computing, to putting up with answering my same questions multiple times, to sincerely coaching me and standing by my side, Mark certainly is amongst the top few in my gratitude journey. My comeback journey to MSFT was not easy in any way. If there was one word to describe my most significant hindrance to retreat, it was fear. Somehow I was just scared of failing all over again. When I retreated to MSFT, I was carrying within myself a heavy subconscious baggage of debt from my previous journeys and their residual criticisms. As an external entity, we are always ready to judge others on their life choices and abilities, with no understanding of where they come from and what their authentic lived experiences are. From having been told previously that I must have been insane to have left my jobs at MSFT, to making assumptions about my job performance, the remarks swung all the way to the other end of the pendulum as well. I was bluntly reminded of what a disservice I had done to myself by standing in my own way, in the pursuit of my graduate degree. And then there were reminders that the position of services that I was being offered were an actual trust laid on my shoulders, and I should really honor them diligently, not just for myself, but for the sake of the perception of my community, especially in this day and age.
Hitting pause. The year 2014 was a game changer. I had dedicated the December holiday times for studying and contemplated whether I should take my books to California or somewhere else. However, I had a shift of heart and listened to the self-need of wanting a real break. I jumped on the plane to Penang, Malaysia that winter without any books. From only watching movies on the plane to really immersing myself fully on the Penang beach, I was rejuvenated inside out that winter. Consequently, I started 2015 on a much fresher note, which made all the difference going forward. In mid-February, our team presented its first version of the product, codenamed Weave, to Satya Nadella. Why has E plus C been a game changer? In 2006, upon departing from MSFT, I ran into Parul Manik when she gave me a very reassuring hug. Little did I know then that a decade later, our paths would cross again in the Enterprise and Cloud, E plus C organization, where she would continue to mentor and nurture my career in her role as a partner GM. In late 2017, I was looking for a change and landed in Ganesh Pandey's organization, under Kameshwar Jayaraman, aka Kamesh. Initially, I was genuinely scared of joining the team as someone coming from pure front-end development to a hardcore back-end team. In retrospect, as Kamesh had called out, his organization indeed was one of the most inclusive and well-rounded across the board. My fears rested when I got promoted to a senior within a year of joining his team. I would attribute it to the nurturing environment of the organization, which not only helped me to excel technically, but also gave me the space to do my extracurricular work without having to compromise my work reviews. From being able to work on my passion hackathon projects on cognitive intelligence, to harboring my creativity in writing, I was able to pursue my side aspirations at MSFT while continuing my climate work. Somehow, it was my lucky stars that at the beginning of 2019, Kamesh connected me to Anand Vaidyanathan's team, where there was a need for a front-end React developer. Since that was my core passion, I made the transition to Anand's team. It was there that I was finally able to bring Marsha Chechik's compiler teachings to fruition and deployed the first version of my automated compiler code generation tool. In 2020, my manager gave me an organization-wide project for updating the flight infrastructure. In software engineering, flights are used to stage software deployment and rollouts to different rings and cadences. To begin with, I was a bit hesitant to take on the project, and the first few weeks were tough. Dealing with ambiguity and hardcore anxiety in unknown terrains is part of any new domain that one onboards to. However, my principal lesson and secret to success in that event was to put structure to the open-endedness of the problem. In the face of an extensive monolithic system, carving out small pieces of the puzzle certainly gave me the dopamine rush to keep going. This was immensely helpful, instead of having to stare at the frozen zone of a gigantic mountain every morning. I achieved this by creating work items for the smallest and the most ambiguous tasks. In the end, thanks only to God, I was awarded a principal promotion in 2021 after delivering this highly impactful feature. A tribute to mentors. Thanks to James Rodriguez, Howard Hurst, Julie Waterhouse, Kelly Lyons, Rohit Kapoor, Salman Zafar, Mohsin Kalam, Sveinar Ramason, Samuele Carpinetti, Anne Williams, Roy Herod, Daniel Godbout, Sarah Dawson, and anyone else I may have forgotten, for all your support through the years. The other side of women in computing. In 2018, I wrote an article called The Other Side of Women in Computing. The crux of the article was that as much as there is a hyper-emphasis in our communities on pushing women to succeed professionally and academically, my views on the same were neutral. I also called out that in my own journey, on many occasions, I looked up to the wives of those Fortune 500 executives, only to discover later that some of them actually envied my life choices. When I first published the article, I was not sure about the reactions from both the family and the corporate management. Contrary to my original expectations, I got a supportive shoulder from both sides. Members of the family stood up to my sentiments. Some folks went as far as encouraging me not to withhold my opinions, especially in this day and age, for the fear of worldly or ally reactions. On the work end, Kamesh, my manager then, exemplified examples of women who were wives of executives and felt despaired when their own education and achievements were not used, especially in the initial years of their transitions. Also, he exemplified women from other communities who were living successful lives as single, independent women without having any marital responsibilities. The question, of course, remains on whether the success of women comes at a price or not. Or do women in any lifestyle, regardless of which path they choose, must always pay a price? Thank you for watching. To read the full story, please get the book Software Diaries by Irum Godil. If you like this video, please share it, especially with women who may need encouragement.